Hello and welcome to The Secret Agenda, the podcast about conspiracy theories. Today we will be talking about Diatlöv's Pass. My name is George and with me we got
Tristan.
Bhumika.
And Fiza.
All right, so let's get right to it.
Thank you,
So
George.
I'm going to start off with the intro, guys. Bear with us. Lots of twists and turns with this one. So the story, it all starts in January 1959. A 23-year-old hiker named Igor Dyatlov led a journey to reach the peak of Orton, a mountain in the northern Urals of Soviet Russia. The young men brought a team of 9 experienced hikers, many from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, along with them for the adventure. Before he left, he had told his sports club that he and his team would send them a telegraph as soon as they returned. But that telegram was never sent, and none of those hikers from the so-called Dyatlov Pass incident were ever seen alive again. Ooh. The crazy part, guys, when their bodies were found in the coming weeks, their strange and gruesome injuries left investigators baffled and repulsed. Some of their eyes were even missing, another one missing her tongue, and many were struck by a force comparable to the speed of a car. But no one can make sense of it, okay? Even to this day. The Soviet government closed the Dyatlov's Pass case very quickly, in my opinion, and offered a thin explanation saying the hikers died due to hypothermia because they were inexperienced, which I disagree, and that maybe something like an avalanche was at fault. But with that explanation clearing up almost none of the lingering questions, amateur sleuths, people like us, have been puzzled over this mystery of the Dyatlov Pass for the last 60 years. And while the Russian government did reopen the case in 2019, we still don't know exactly what happened on that snowy mountain all those years ago.
Yikes. So to kind of go along with it, investigators are able to basically piece that they had gone missing around February 1st or 2nd, as they were expecting the telegram that never came. And by approximately February 20th was when they were finally realized that there absolutely was no communication coming from the group. And now they're sending a search party all the way up to where their last location would have been. And when they went, they did find bodies, but the state at which the bodies were there only raised way more questions. And it wasn't until February 26th that the bodies actually started surfacing. They found the first set of them along with their tent that had now been essentially cut up, where they cut it from the inside to kind of get out as if they were running away from something. And a lot of the team's belongings were actually in the tent as well. So that included several pairs of shoes, which meant that they were essentially leaving, boots. They were leaving the camp either bare feet, in socks, or just with one shoe. Again, the Russian government likes to say that they weren't experienced, but they had been on many treks before. They had navigated pretty steep mountains and stuff. So it wasn't the fact that this group would have made such a critical error, more so than something definitely startled them. They also found 8 or 9 sets of footprints. And again, some of those footprints had either nothing, so just toes, or they were wearing socks or a single shoe. And those were found by the woods, which was nearly a mile away from their campsite. Some of the bodies, including the 2 Yuris that were actually on the team, were dressed only in their underwear in freezing cold temperatures, where it was anywhere between minus 13 to minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, they say, which is minus
30 something, 40.
Yeah.
It's freezing. Yeah.
There's no reason for something like that, essentially. Basically, after the set of those first few bodies, they found the next 3 bodies, including Dyatlov, Zineda, and Kolmogorovo, along with Slobodin, which is Rustam Slobodin. I think he was one of the older ones there, but even then, the oldest of the group was 23, 24. Yeah. And it says that they had all died on their way back to the camp, meaning they had run out of their tent and were somehow now trying to navigate their way back. And that's where their bodies were all kind of scattered. So the official notice is that they had died from hypothermia, obviously because it was cold. But as they continued to find more and more of the bodies, a lot of the injuries just didn't make sense. So including one of the hikers who had gray foam coming out from their right cheek and gray liquid coming from his mouth. There were also head injuries involved that were consistent with someone falling and bashing their head repeatedly over and over.
Blunt
Which again-
force trauma.
Yeah, but I mean, like, why?
Crack
right?
your
That's
skull,
the biggest
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like full skull
It's
fractures,
kind
full
of
injuries that can
mysterious how
kill.
it happened. Though.
Nothing's
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
consistent, but kind of
Yeah.
odd, right?
Yeah, and that's not even like the brink of it because it just gets,
It gets
weirder
worse.
the more and more
It
you
Gets
find out.
way worse.
So Kolmogorova, the one that I had mentioned earlier, actually had a baton-shaped bruise on her side. Which again, like, what is even out there in the ice that would cause something like that? Meanwhile, other bodies had no surface injuries at all.
It was all internal.
Internal
It was all
trauma.
internal.
Yeah.
So
And-
sorry, go ahead.
No, and like these internal wounds had no bruising on the outside, which was very
No.
odd. And typically, like if you do get an internal injury, usually, or like 99% of the time, there's something that's going to show on the outside.
Listen, if I punch George in the face right now, he's gonna bruise.
Right.
Like, you know, I don't know if I could hit him enough for internal damage, but
You would have to be
there's
pretty
gonna be a bruise.
Maybe I'll give it a go.
Wow, I feel targeted. Okay.
Yeah. So after those first set of bodies were found, they found 4 more bodies in the upcoming 2 months after. And that just made the mystery even more so because those injuries were nothing compared to these ones that are about
Missing
to come up.
tongue.
Yeah.
So the remaining hikers, they were found buried under the snow in a ravine that was pretty close to the cedar, but a little bit further. And they actually named that area Dyatlev's Pass Den.
Now that you bring it up, what was very interesting about that cedar tree?
Oh,
Because we never mentioned it.
Yeah. So with that cedar tree, at some point, they have a lot of branches kind of gathered around the bottom. And it seems like, according to a lot of the injuries that were found, I believe it was the 2 Yuris that had these injuries, they had cuts all up on their hands, which means that they must have either been trying to scale that tree to get away from something, or they were trying to like just break the wood for whatever reason.
There was also skin fragments on the tree itself.
Yeah.
There was a branch that was 5 meters up or something. What was it?
I
5
think it
meters,
was,
5 feet?
yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Up that was broken that technically shouldn't have been because it would take like literally human superpowers to break.
Exactly. And so it really raises questions about what they were mentally going through at
Yeah.
that time, right? To think
Or-
that that was their options.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
were they running from something? Was something attacking
Because they
them?
left the tent without any stuff, like their
Yeah.
boots
Yeah.
and the.
They didn't
the
have
things-
gloves. They didn't have
Yeah.
hats or
They're-
scarves.
And in the
Yeah, and they're
freezing
way too
cold, how
experienced
could like
to
a
make a
person have
mistake like that.
survived without those, items?
Yeah, exactly.
And their bare minimum survival gear, pretty much, especially
Pretty
in those
much.
weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At best, right? So
Like, that's the
Nikolai,
minimum.
yeah. So Nikolai, 23, actually had significant skull damage, kind of similar to the earlier injury I was talking about, but also not in the sense that moments before his death, Dubinina, who is 20 years old, I think she was like the youngest one on the team, and Zolotaryov, which is I think the oldest, which is 38,
38, yeah.
they had major chest fractures. And when I say major, I mean it seemed like, according to these injuries, you would have been hit by a
A
truck,
car.
By a vehicle.
car
Yeah.
or
by
Car-
some
it's car-
fast-moving vehicle to have caused
Yeah.
something of that
Yeah,
much
100
damage.
kilometer plus speed accidents.
Yeah, exactly. And again, keep in mind they're just in the mountains in some snow. Like
And
that's
there's
it.
no vehicles up there.
There's no vehicles up there. Now, the most gruesome part about this is that Dubinina was actually missing not just her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips,
yeah.
some of her facial tissue, and even fragments of her skull bone. Like they were just gone and missing.
That is disgusting.
That's
Yeah.
gross and also just terrifying.
How did that happen, actually?
yeah. And
Animal
then
went slurp slurp.
maybe, well, that's one of the theories, but
what-
there's so much around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They also found the body of Alexander, 24 at the time, who was kind of located in the same area as these bodies, but he had no injuries. So again, no surface injuries,
That's very
nothing
mysterious.
weird,
Yeah.
And
Like-
lots of clothes on too.
and clothes
Yeah.
on. Exactly. Meanwhile, Kolvetov and Dubinina had radioactive, like they had
Clothing.
traces. Yeah, like they had traces of radioactive
material.
Material, yeah.
goop. I don't know. I don't know what radio. Yeah, I don't know what that looks like. But basically, there's traces of radioactive substances on their clothes, and it was only these 2 people. Now, it is important to mention that it seemed like a lot of these people kind of died at separate times.
Yeah.
So a lot of the theory is that as you know, some of their friends were dying and stuff, they were taking whatever articles of clothing from those bodies in order to stay warm. So a lot of their clothes, even
Trying
though
to
they
save
belonged,
themselves.
Yeah.
yeah. So even though they belonged to other people and stuff, some of the bodies are found with other people's articles of clothing.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah.
Which, I mean, you're just trying to survive at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Person's dead, might as well take some clothes. Right?
Exactly. So the question really is, what happened up
yeah.
there? And there's a lot of conspiracy theories around that thing. I mean, I have my own personal belief of it, but it's interesting
After,
kind of like open the floor.
After like what you like Feza and Tristan, whatever you explained till now, like introduced about the case study, just see that every hiker they went together, they were all experienced.
They
but
were experienced, correct.
Very
Every
athletic
hiker had
people.
like a different way of the way their bodies were found, the way what happened, but it is kind of very mysterious to know.
It is.
that-
And I didn't
yeah.
even mention the fact that they were documenting a lot of their trip too.
Yeah.
So they
They
all
had
had
journals.
cameras, they had
Cameras,
diaries, and that's how investigators are able to kind of piece together when they might have
told
gone
them
missing.
that they're going
But-
to send them a telegram, but then that never happened.
They never happened.
But-
They
Yeah.
found a few photos, but they were still missing, I think.
What's
Yeah.
creepy
But
to me?
there's- There was cameras missing when they discovered them, and there was cameras discovered. There's notepads and whatnot that went missing after the fact.
Yeah. What's kind of creepy to me though is like all those journals and everything they wrote, the photos. They actually seem like they're having a good time, guys.
Yeah.
Oh,
right?
yeah. They're smiling in photos.
Yeah.
Like, they're not
And they're enjoying
worried.
themselves.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
making
You know?
jokes, having a
Yeah.
great time, saying
Yeah.
the food's great and everything, and
Yeah.
then kabam, all of a sudden, just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That, and it's important to also note that technically it was a group of 10 originally, right?
Yeah.
And they had gone up, I think, to about midway of their trip until one of them, another Yuri,
Yeah, go.
he ended up actually getting sick and turning back.
Yeah.
And he ended up being the only
Sole
survivor of that group.
Of the group.
And
yeah.
so when he was asked about what happened or what he thinks that happened, because obviously he didn't know, even he had a lot of distrust, particularly with the Soviet government at the time. But he also just couldn't even understand. And I think that although he lived, I believe, like 76 or something.
Yeah, he died in 2013.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he publicly mentioned quite a few times that he always felt really guilty about the
Guilty,
fact that he
yeah.
made it out and none of his friends did.
Yeah.
I
Him
wouldn't have
being
felt
sick.
guilty.
Yeah.
But like him being sick was the last moment that like he'd ever see any of his friends that they were
Yeah,
on
it's
this
super
huge
sad.
expedition
He didn't know
with.
what's gonna happen, so
Exactly. And it's just nuts. So let's dive a little bit into the conspiracy theories around it, because I feel like there's so many,
yeah.
and yet a lot of them will touch on certain things but then leave out a lot of details.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of details here, so we try to get through as fast as we
And
can.
bear with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, I think it's really important to note that this is in Soviet Union, Russia, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Super bait. Yeah.
So, and this is just after World War II, essentially. So
Sneaky
there's still,
guys.
I mean,
And
there's
they
a lot
closed
going
the
on.
case as soon as possible.
They
closed
did. It
very
was just
quickly.
really shady the way
Yeah.
they
The
closed it.
autopsies were really
Yeah.
quick and stuff.
Yeah, the
not
funerals
much
were
detail.
done very
Yeah.
quickly after
Yeah.
those bodies were discovered. They were brought back to cities and they were promptly buried. And it wasn't until I think when they reopened the case in 2018 or 19
yeah.
that they actually took out one of those bodies from the graves to try and run an
Yeah.
autopsy again to try and figure out what happened.
Because there's something wrong that happened in the autopsy last time when they did it that time.
Yeah,
It wasn't done
exactly.
properly.
It wasn't done
It
properly.
was really thorough.
Yeah.
And that's what I
see
mean. Like,
cover up.
see, and that's what I think. But on the other end of things, like, I think it's a very North American or like Western view to be so skeptical of like Russian government or like Chinese government is like a parallel to that, right? So I feel like we kind of have it in our psychology to be like, nah, I don't trust them.
Yeah.
But that being said,
I don't
the
trust
det-
them.
I don't
Yeah.
trust them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like who
We don't
knows if
trust them.
anything is real at this point.
yeah,
right?
and it was just too weird. Honestly, I'm just gonna say it. I think that they stumbled across either some area where they were, doing experiments or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they
Wrong place,
were
wrong time.
Yeah, I'm not saying that necessarily like, the government killed them and buried it and all that stuff, but I do think they probably got a little too close to something that they weren't able to see or
What
weren't
I-
supposed
Shouldn't
to
see,
see.
yeah.
What I think is they didn't open up the case or didn't do the investigation properly because they had some intentions that would come out if it was done
Yeah.
properly. So they would have been in trouble. So
They would have had too many questions
Yeah.
to answer, and
Yeah.
so it was easier to
they
just
had to be
bury a bunch
accountable
of
to many
kids.
people. So the government had to be accountable. So
I think so.
And
And-
the varying deaths, like
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to the KGB. One guy had his neck snapped. They're all very different. There was no consistency, right?
no, there's no
Yeah.
consistency, and also there's no need to be almost sneaky about it.
yeah.
Because, they're in the mountains. Like, how
Yeah.
many other people are going to be there?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if they did run into someone
Yeah.
and, you know, there would probably be a moment of relief. That's like, oh,
Yeah.
cool. Like there's another person here. But I know if it was me, I'd be like, why is there another
Yeah.
person here?
Yeah.
Like
no.
that'd
The
be
way
terrifying.
they blamed it on that they were inexperienced, that was absolutely
That's
not true.
shady.
No,
Yeah.
they were super
They were
experienced
super
hikers.
experienced, yeah.
Super experienced, super athletic, super
Yeah.
fit.
And they had done
Like,
expeditions like this
yeah.
before.
This
so-
was,
Exactly.
but we have to know that this was gonna be the hardest level 3 expedition they were ever gonna go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were experienced with level 1, level 2s. They did tons, and maybe it was a little more of a challenge. I don't think they bit off more than they can chew. I think they were very well equipped, and genuinely something did go wrong.
But the conditions in which their bodies were found, it didn't seem like something happened like with natural disaster
Just
or something.
out of the blue. Yeah.
It's like,
And also, how do you explain the radiation?
yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense to me.
That it doesn't make sense, but we also know that those two did work at a
Radioactive
cleanup plant.
Yeah. So it does kind of make sense.
So it might be residue
Yeah.
because they were the only people exposed, and that stuff does linger on you for a while.
But how long are we talking?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Know what I mean?
Depends
Like, I
how
don't know
much
what the logistics
radioactive
are.
cleanup. That's a big
No,
mess. right?
radioactive matter can take
Stay a long
very,
while.
very that like places that have been nuked
Mm-hmm.
have even to this day are still somewhat radioactive.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at
Because-
Chernobyl, right?
Yeah, like it's good. That
Yeah.
stuff. There's obviously the whole half life. We're not going to get into chemistry, but that takes that takes a very long period of time for it to completely disintegrate. So maybe they had a very little amount, just enough for it to be detectable, and just enough for it to add more questions. And especially with tech back in the day, it wasn't accurate.
It wasn't the most
It
efficient. I
wasn't-
get that.
Yeah. So all they know is yes, they had radioactive material on them. Is it from their workplace or is it from there? Nobody knows.
Also, guys, only 2 of them had it, right? If there was anything
Yeah.
radioactive, you wouldn't think that all of them had
Yeah.
radioactive materials found on them. And then the only 2 that had it found on them were actually had a certain past with radioactive materials, right?
Yeah.
I
So
guess that makes
I would
sense.
kind of slide that one
That
under.
makes
But
more sense
More
than I would
sense,
like to
yeah.
admit.
But what do you guys think?
I
Maybe-
want it to be
Yeah.
weird.
Let's move on to the supernatural
Yeah.
component.
Oh, yeah.
The
So-
avalanche.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
No, the
Yetis.
supernatural part is
Supernatural.
the
Yeti.
yeah.
UFO.
So
The Yeti,
the other
yeah.
thing that I didn't mention also is again they did recover quite a bit of film that the students had at the time, and amongst that there's this one particular
Picture.
photo. Maybe just put it up while you're
Yeah,
editing.
I will
Yeah.
put it up.
But this one particular photo, and it looks like a Yeti. Like,
well,
and
it
so there's
looks
a
like
lot
there's some sort of
Something, yeah.
some sort of creature in the background.
yeah, it's a crazy photo, and
lot of-
so there's a lot of conspiracies that
Yeah.
like maybe the Yeti attacked them at night, but also
A Yeti, another
A Yeti.
creature.
Yeah.
They did seem like they were trying to get away from something and maybe climb. So was it a Yeti? Was it something supernatural? Was
Maybe
it
a UFO.
Was it
Yeah,
aliens?
the way their tent
Was
was,
it-
like all torn off. They left their
From the
stuff.
inside.
Yeah, from the
Yeah.
inside.
Was it
They were
something?
trying to escape.
It could be like honestly, it could be something as simple as a bear because
Yeah.
they had food lying around, whatever.
Yeah.
would there be bears
Yes,
in the
yes.
Ural
There-
Mountains?
Yes, there is.
Okay,
There
yeah.
is. But you know, they
There
did.
is, but they had expeditions before,
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
would know how to tackle these situations.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't
Yeah.
leave their like axes
Axes
and
and-
everything
yeah,
inside and
and
scurry
stuff,
away, right?
yeah.
It's honestly and genuinely something caught them so off guard that they were so disoriented. They didn't think straight, and they just boogied out of there.
Yeah.
Whether it was they were running
Yeah.
away, whether it was them being under the influence of whatever, maybe something in that area, as we said earlier.
Alcohol.
yeah.
They were,
Yeah.
Well,
so-
alcohol could be a thing, but there was another thing actually that I read into while we were kind of going through the conspiracy theories that are involved. It was what is it called? Can't think of it. Not ultra.
UV.
No.
Oh,
it
the
was the sound.
ultrasonic sound.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
the
the
sonic
ultrasonic.
waves?
Yeah.
Yes, the sound. I can't remember what it's called.
It's,
for the life of me.
it's
Now I suck.
it's the
But-
opposite of
Ultra.
It's,
yeah.
it's the opposite of ultrasound.
Yeah,
basically,
ultrasound.
it's like, but basically, how it goes is if you have just the perfect conditions, right? Because you're up in the mountains, the wind is blowing. It creates basically a sound that our human hearing can't necessarily pick up. But because it's so low, it changes the frequency in the environment. And that feeling alone, because like
Disorienting.
it's very
Yeah.
disorienting. So a
Yeah.
lot like electromagnetic fields,
Yeah.
they can make someone really anxious and antsy. And there have been actual studies on this phenomena.
Yeah, especially with the amount of winds that they
I guess
get
they
down
could
there.
feel
and the
that there's something
vibrations.
wrong happening, the sounds and
Well, not
everything.
just feel, but it's
Yeah.
enough to
Yeah, it
quite
goes- makes you
literally
go
drive
crazy.
someone
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah.
And
Either
so
crazy or make you sick.
You can't
literally.
sleep, you
You
can't
can-
eat.
yeah.
These guys just hit deliria, got up and
Yeah,
just started
it's
going
just
crazy.
this
One
imminent-
person rips the tent and it's over. Everyone starts
Yeah.
following or something.
yeah,
you know?
everyone starts freaking out at the same time, and it's just this delirium that essentially takes them, and maybe that even
Well,
right.
that could be wind too.
Like how
right?
much is well, part of it comes from wind,
Yeah.
like the actual sound. But I wonder if some of these injuries were either self-inflicted or inflicted by other
By
people.
other people,
Whether it's
yeah.
because of this, infrasound. That was the one.
Infrasound.
Yes.
Infrasound.
Infrasound, yeah.
We go whether
out.
I figured it out. Whether it's because of infrasound or I know that there were other conspiracies. I think you mentioned
Yeah,
Bhumika that
yeah.
murder could have been one.
Yeah, a murder because
That seems like a good place to
But
murder
murder
someone.
by who though?
but then
Well, there could be
but the way-
conflict. It could even be an
Yeah.
accident. You know.
See the way their bodies, like that someone's tongue's missing, an eye is missing, the way their body parts are missing, that's kind of mysterious. And it is something that external
But-
force can do, not like a weather condition or, supernatural
also-
powers.
Yeah, with the tongue and eyes, those are very soft tissues, and that's typically and usually the first thing eaten by wild creatures in the wild,
Yeah.
especially
true. But
scavengers.
we also-
so we don't really know.
Yeah, we also didn't mention, guys, that there was also a tribe that lived in that area called
Yeah.
the Mansi.
Yeah.
About a
Yes.
kilometer away,
Yeah.
there was
tribe,
basically a
yeah.
concentration camp for prisoners.
Yeah.
So one could have escaped. So murder is
Yeah.
a question, but
Not to mention, they actually named that area Dead Mountain.
Dead
Yeah.
Like it
Mountain.
translates.
But
I
why
think
is it Dead
Kyoto.
Mountain?
Yeah.
Why is it Dead Mountain?
That I don't know.
Because years
I'm glad someone
earlier, the same amount, which is also what makes all this weird, 9 hunters from that tribe, went up that mountain and never came back.
Yeah.
Helicopters have fallen.
So there's always been a lot of
So
mystery
it's-
around this
Mystery
area, I
around-
guess.
yeah.
And for some reason, there's always the number 9 associated.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
really, really,
Oh.
really trippy
Yeah.
when it comes
So
to conspiracy theories.
9 hunters from the tribe, 9
God.
students
Ooh,
on
goosebumps.
thing. Yeah,
I didn't even
We're
think of
literally
that.
getting goosebumps
Yeah,
here.
that freaked me out. I don't like
so
that.
who knows?
But nonetheless, guys, to be honest, I would rule out murder and kind of getting robbed or attacked by a human because they still had all of their personal belongings. They had their clothes, their jewels, their money,
Yeah,
their cash, their food. None
Yeah.
of the girls were touched sexually as well.
Yeah, and,
so
Yeah.
and those criminals were known that if they encountered women, they were not going to let them go
get
easily.
jiggy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
I mean,
hate
that's
to
one
say
way
it.
to put it.
I hate to say it.
yeah,
but-
no, but get jiggy in the wrong way,
Right.
or the
Not in
non-consensual
the fun way. Not in the fun way.
But they were perfectly clothed, perfectly fine.
I mean,
no
not
sign-
perfectly.
No,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in a sexual manner.
Yeah.
No signs of rape, no signs of assault of any kind.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
So
just
we can say that for a murder happening, there's not a lot of evidence that was available. So
it's a
That's true.
possibility, but
Possibility.
it's a stretch.
So here's the
What-
thing, right?
Yeah.
According to Occam's razor,
Yeah.
right, which we learned about in class,
Yeah.
sometimes the easiest, I mean, obviously this is not a direct quote, but
Yeah.
sometimes the easiest answer is also probably the most right
Most right,
answer.
yeah.
And
And
I
I-
think that leads us to natural causes, guys.
yeah.
It does.
What
Here you go.
what I've heard was that investigators said that there was avalanche
Yeah.
which could
Yeah.
have caused it because it was like a steep slope over there and the
Yeah.
conditions over there were at that time were not good.
True,
It
that
was
and they did
the-
get turned around a little bit
Yeah.
too. They
Yeah.
were like 500 feet or something away from where they were supposed to be to begin with.
So
that
this
was-
is-
Also,
There
wouldn't
was
have
an
been your
early
typical
warning that
avalanche.
there was an early warning that there's gonna be happening something like
It was a
that.
specific kind of
Yeah.
So this is my theory, guys.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research on this.
Yeah.
She's ready.
Yeah, at first, I don't think. Well, they basically ruled out an avalanche at first, basically saying that like those slopes doesn't really have like real avalanches. But then they did propose and they did say in 2019 that it's possible kind of this snow slab avalanche where basically like the ground kind of shakes and moves,
Yeah.
which would freak someone out, you know?
That would be enough. Like just
Yeah.
hearing the rumble of it, like
Exactly.
from where your tent would be in the middle of the night.
It hits one side of the tent, they cut out the other side of the tent, start running, thinking it's an actual real avalanche.
crush injuries.
They
oh,
could
right. The chest injuries.
chest
Yeah.
injuries. You know, one of them could have got hit very hard from the start. Then they boogied to that cedar tree, not realizing how far they went, but they wanted to go to those trees in case it was an avalanche so they could climb up the tree and be safe. Then they realized, oh no, we're all stuck here. They had a little fire. So they decided, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to survive here. So they left 2 guys by the fire.
Which is where the bodies were found.
Where
Yeah.
the 2 bodies were
bodies
found.
yeah.
Then the other ones went back up to the supplies to go grab them things, died on their way
Didn't
up.
make it.
And then the other 4 basically try to make some type of shelter or survival. In the
In Dietlo's
meantime,
den,
yeah,
right?
the 2 guys basically died of hypothermia.
There's
Yeah.
one more thing that some of the bodies could have been found in water and the animals could have eaten up. Like we
eyeballs.
said, the soft tissues, the animals could have taken
That's
out their
true.
eyes
Yeah.
or lips.
And in my
Yeah.
opinion, what people don't realize is there's actually a river right over the
Yeah.
snow where they made that den. So what
Yeah.
I think was
Yeah.
possible is they built that little igloo, you know, they dug a little bit too deep and fell through
Yeah.
basically into the water, igloo
And-
collapsing
yeah.
on them, crushing all their bones, etc. And then their bodies kind of get scurried around the river, right?
Yeah.
Animals
Yeah.
eat the eyes, eat the tongue.
Yeah.
And then they kind of get found progressively in that case, you know?
Yeah.
It's
And that was, I think, one of the 3 ones that were tested when the case reopened.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
when it
super
reopened in-
scientifically.
Yeah, so I think it was I can't remember the 3rd one, but I do remember avalanche and snow slab were the 2 more likely
Hurricane.
ones. I think hurricane,
Hurricane,
yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
Hurricane was the last one, but I don't think they could really
have a hurricane over
yeah.
there.
But that
Maybe.
being said, now that we kind of have most of the conspiracy theories on the table,
But I have to say something.
Yeah.
There's a question that arises that they were so experienced hikers, then why did they camp at such a spot where they knew that this
And
something's
that
gonna-
leads to my natural causes, you know. They
Yeah.
made a mistake and they
They made a
realized
mistake and they freaked out.
They freaked out. They're like, we got to camp right here because we're not
and
going to
it
make
was
it
getting
anywhere
dark
else.
by then
Yeah,
too, is from what
exactly.
I've read online.
Yeah.
So you know,
some
They were
point you
already-
gotta just give up,
They were
right?
already off course. They were tired. They needed to rest. And
they
finding
did it
a
in the
better
wrong place.
campsite-
They did it in the wrong
Finding a better
place.
Yeah.
campsite might have taken too long, so they were maybe not willing to risk it. So they said, just here and now, let's do it here. And that maybe cost them their life.
Yeah, and these
Yeah.
conditions maybe led to worse natural conditions like that snow slab or avalanche, or it just could have been wind, guys. You
it
know,
could have
Like,
it could have been the wind driving them nuts.
you
but
know,
nonetheless,
Yeah.
you know, we have so many conspiracy theories. They did reopen. They did close the case again recently,
Yeah.
saying that it was essentially an avalanche, which
Yeah.
seems like the most likely option realistically.
Yeah.
But
it's still not
it's
proven.
still a question,
It's still
and it's still not
proven.
proven
Yeah.
because when it closed, there's still trials to this day around some of the investigators that were involved in
Yes.
that reopening of a case,
Yeah.
saying that there was something within the case that wasn't evaluated correctly, that
Properly,
the
yeah.
investigation
was done so
wasn't-
poorly.
Yeah.
it was done
It
poorly.
was
It wasn't
rushed, it was
conducted
done
properly.
But then we
A
know
lot
who
of
did
stuff were
it.
missing.
Yeah. So then at the end of the day, like, do we really have an answer?
You know.
I don't think so. And
I don't think so. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to do with human psychology where we want to think that it's the fun
KGB,
one.
aliens,
Yeah, like the fun
the
solution.
Soviet
Like,
Unions, the
yeah, Soviet
Yeah.
Union, we don't trust them.
We
We,
don't
want it
trust
to
them
be
at all,
them.
yeah.
Aliens, we want to prove that aliens exist, so we want it to be aliens
Yeah.
or a Yeti, or
Yeti.
something.
Yeti, yeah.
Right? I think it always going with like the scientific thing isn't always necessarily the most fun solution to things.
Yeah.
Not that the situation is fun.
And
But-
at the same time, being human, we always want answers.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, because it happened such a long time ago, a lot of details are missing, a lot of things are there. And simply put, it's just we're never really going to have an answer unless we somehow like build a time machine and go back in
Back.
time and
Yeah.
see what happened.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, it's complicated. It's a hot mess. We can always make our own conclusions of things. We can
I
use
still want to
science.
stick with Soviet Union. To
Yeah.
See, I'm
just- my
cool with
heart
that
says-
too.
I can agree with Soviet
because
Union.
they did a lot of cover up.
Yeah.
They didn't do the
They have a
investigation
whole history
properly.
of it. I mean, so
Yeah.
does the American Canadian governments.
Yeah,
but, like,
CIA, everything. We can also we it could also be natural causes, whether it's weather, avalanche,
Avalanche, yeah.
But I think those are the two
simply-
main
Which
suspects.
I think are the
or
more
simply,
likely ones.
Like, or it can be something as simple as an animal. Like,
Yeah.
who knows? And
Who knows?
it's so snowy up there. Even animal footprints wouldn't exactly last long either.
Yeah.
All I know is ain't no one sending me up a mountain.
No.
No.
With ice.
Especially not in negative like
Never.
30 degrees.
Especially not
Yeah.
in Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People like me and you would not do
Yeah.
well in
The
Russia.
place is called Death Mountain. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
thought.
so
Well, on that beautiful note, we will not be hiking up any mountains
Yeah.
ever. And
Not
I
anytime
guess
soon, at
we will
least.
just
It
continue
was
to keep
one
up.
tragic story, one hell of a rabbit hole. Guys, it was a pleasure doing this podcast.
Oh,
So
yeah.
fun.
You know?
So thank you for
It
coming
was
in.
fun talking to you.
Oh yeah,
We
of
should do
course.
more.
Yeah.
This
So-
might be my podcast career.
Oh, of
This
course.
might be kicking it
Of
off.
To our lovely listeners, thank you for listening today at the
Secret agenda.
Secret
Secret
Agenda.
agenda.
We're still working on it. We're,
Yeah,
we're working
still
on the
working on it.
branding.
The Secret
Agenda.
Agenda.
But let us know what you think. Oh, sorry.
And no.
yeah. But let us know what your conspiracy
Yeah.
theory solution is, because we just seem to be kind of at odds, but there's so many out
What do you
there.
guys think after
Avalanche,
hearing
KGB.
us? After hearing the
What do you guys
facts?
think,
Yeah.
Eric, Justin?
We have some special.
Opinions, anything?
Well,
Hear anything
anyways.
about? Okay. Yeah, so
Thanks.
thank you for
Thanks for that.
listening.
Thank
and
you for listening, guys.
catch us on our next episode. Thank you and have a good
See
rest
you.
of your day.
Bye.